I never thought a tiny blue vial from a sketchy corner of the dark web would be the reason I'm currently sitting in a sterile observation room, watching my own fingernails grow at a rate that is frankly terrifying. But here we are. It started because I was hopelessly, pathetically in love with Maya, a girl whose brain worked like a quantum computer, while mine felt like a dusty calculator with a dying battery. I was tired of being the nice guy who didn't understand her physics jokes, so when I saw an ad for a cognitive enhancement serum promising an IQ jump of 50 points, I didn't just buy it. I injected it directly into my bloodstream in the school library. Within 10 minutes, I wasn't just solving equations. I could hear the electrical hum of the fluorescent lights and predict the exact second the librarian would sneeze. But as my mind expanded, the world around me began to feel like a slow-motion nightmare of stupidity, and I realized that being the smartest person in the room is a death sentence when your heart is still human. Was I wrong for trying to rewrite my own DNA just to be worthy of a girl's attention? Or would you have risked your sanity too if it meant finally being seen? I really need you to be honest with me because as I tell you how this all unfolded, you'll see that the price of genius is way higher than any tuition fee I could ever pay. To understand how I ended up as a human experiment, you have to understand who I was before the serum. I was Leo, the guy who sat in the back of the AP physics class, nodding along like I understood the Doppler effect while secretly wondering if I'd left my oven on. Maya was the sun that my entire pathetic little world orbited around. She was brilliant, the kind of person who read Kierkegaard for fun and corrected the professors with a polite smile that made my heart do backflips. We were friends, or at least we were study partners, where she did the studying and I did the admiring. One Tuesday, we were sitting in the campus cafe, and she was talking about the Fermi paradox with so much passion that her eyes were literally sparking. I tried to chime in with a joke I'd read on Reddit, and she just gave me this look. Not a mean look, but a look of genuine, soul-crushing pity. It was the look you give a golden retriever that's trying to catch its own tail. In that moment, something in me snapped. I didn't want to be the golden retriever anymore. I wanted to be the guy who could challenge her, the guy who could keep up with her mind. That night I spiraled. I stayed up until 4 in the morning scouring forums for anything that could give me an edge. Nootropics, experimental drugs, anything. That's when I found the Cerebro-V serum. The website looked like it was designed in 1998, but the testimonials were chillingly detailed. People claimed they were learning Mandarin in a weekend and solving unsolved math conjectures. It was $500 for a single dose. I used my entire textbook budget for the semester and didn't look back. When the package arrived 3 days later, it was just a plain cardboard box with no return address. Inside was a single glass vial filled with a liquid so blue it looked like it was glowing. There were no instructions, just a warning label that said nonlinear cognitive acceleration may occur. I should have thrown it away right then. Instead, I took it to the quietest corner of the basement library, sterilized a needle with a lighter, and pushed the blue light into my vein. At first, there was nothing but a cold sensation crawling up my arm. Then the world exploded. It wasn't like a caffeine high. It was like someone had taken the blurry, low-resolution feed of my life and suddenly switched it to 8K. I looked at the book in front of me, a dense text on thermodynamics, and I didn't just read the words. I saw the energy. I saw the way the molecules were vibrating. I looked at my watch and realized I could calculate the exact gear ratios based on the sound of the ticking. I rushed to find Maya. She was in the quad, sketching something in her notebook. As I approached her, I could see the tiny micro-expressions on her face, the slight tension in her jaw that meant she was stressed, the way her pupils dilated when she saw me. For the first time, I felt like I was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. I sat down and started talking. I didn't just talk, I lectured. I connected the philosophy of aesthetics to the mathematical precision of the Fibonacci sequence in her drawings. Her jaw literally dropped. For 2 hours, I held her captive with the sheer force of my intellect. She was mesmerized. I felt like a god. But by the second day, the side effects started. My hearing became so sensitive that the sound of someone chewing gum 3 tables away felt like a jackhammer against my skull. Every sensory input was amplified. I could hear the ants crawling in the wall behind my bed. I could smell the individual components of the janitor's cleaning solution from 2 floors up. I couldn't sleep because my brain was running millions of simulations of every conversation I'd ever had, optimizing them, correcting them, obsessing over them. I began rewriting my old essays, realizing they were the incoherent ramblings of a child. I went to my calculus exam and finished a 3-hour test in 15 minutes, correcting the professor's typos in the questions themselves and providing 3 different proofs for every solution. People were starting to notice the change. It wasn't just that I was smart. I was becoming cold, clinical, and increasingly impatient with the slowness of others. It felt like I was stuck in a world where everyone moved through molasses and spoke in half sentences. When Maya tried to tell me about a movie she liked, a simple romantic comedy, I interrupted her for 10 minutes to explain why the narrative structure was mathematically flawed, the lighting was inconsistent with the emotional beats, and the dialogue was inefficient for human communication. I saw the spark in her eyes start to flicker and die, replaced by a growing shadow of fear and confusion. She asked me what was happening to me, and I just laughed, a sound that felt hollow and metallic even to my own ears. I told her I had finally evolved, that I was finally seeing the world for what it was, a series of predictable patterns. I thought I was winning, but I was actually losing the only thing that mattered. My ego began to balloon alongside my intelligence. I started looking at my professors not as mentors, but as obstacles. During a lecture on quantum mechanics, I stood up and spent 20 minutes dismantling the professor's entire thesis, until he walked out of the room in a daze. I felt invincible. I started staying up all night, filling the walls of my dorm room with complex equations written in permanent marker. I didn't need food. I didn't need water. I just needed more data. I started hacking into local servers just to see if I could, watching the data streams like they were a beautiful, intricate dance. But by the 3rd day, the physical toll became impossible to ignore. My skin started to feel tight and itchy, like my body couldn't contain the raw energy my brain was producing. I started seeing patterns in the stock market, in the formation of clouds, even in the way people blinked. It was overwhelming. I was sitting in my room, staring at a wall, calculating the structural integrity of the building and realizing that a single hairline fracture in the basement would bring the whole thing down in exactly 12.4 years. I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back. My eyes looked older, deeper, and completely devoid of warmth. I had achieved my goal. I was the smartest man on campus, maybe the world, but I was utterly alone in a sea of people who now looked like slow, bumbling primates to me. I could see the biological decay in everyone I passed. I could predict their mistakes before they made them. The isolation was absolute. So that is where I was, at the peak of human intelligence, but on the verge of a total mental and physical collapse. I had the girl's attention, but I had lost her heart in the process. I had to decide right then if I should try to find an antidote, or if I should take a second dose to stabilize the reaction, even if it meant leaving my humanity behind forever. Before I tell you what I chose and the horrific price I paid for that decision, I want you to stop and think. If you were me, and you finally had the power to understand everything but felt yourself slipping away from everyone you loved, what would you do? Would you keep the genius, or would you beg to be dumb and happy again? Drop a comment right now and tell me your choice, because what I did next changed the course of my life in a way I can never undo. The pressure in my head became unbearable, a literal physical throbbing that matched the rhythm of my heart. I decided I couldn't go back. I was too addicted to the clarity. I went back to the dark web, desperate to contact the seller for a stabilization dose. But the site was gone. Error 404. It was then that I realized I wasn't a customer. I was a data point. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I was an unmonitored trial, a disposable vessel for a drug that was never meant for the public. I heard a knock at my dorm door. It was Maya. She looked terrified, her eyes red from crying. She told me she had found the empty vial in the library. I had been so arrogant I'd forgotten to dispose of it properly. She begged me to go to the hospital, telling me that I was scaring her, that I wasn't Leo anymore. I looked at her, and for a split second the old Leo, the guy who just wanted to make her laugh, came back. I saw the girl I loved, and I realized I didn't want to explain the universe to her. I just wanted to hold her hand and watch a stupid movie without overanalyzing the frame rate. But the serum flared up again, a surge of chemicals demanding dominance. I told her she was too limited, too primitive to understand the magnificent architecture of what I was becoming. I told her she was a distraction to the greatest mind of the century. I yelled at her to leave, screaming until my voice cracked. As she ran away in tears, I felt a sharp, searing pain in my chest, like my heart was literally trying to quit. My vision tunneled, and I watched the world fade to that same neon blue as the vial. I collapsed, my head hitting the desk covered in equations I would soon forget. When I woke up, I wasn't in my dorm. I was in this high-security medical facility. It turns out the serum was a highly unstable neuromutagen being tracked by several government agencies and a private pharmaceutical firm that had lost a batch. My genius was actually my brain overfiring its neurons to the point of literal self-immolation. They managed to stabilize the chemical reaction, but the damage is permanent and bizarre. My IQ is dropping back down, but it's swinging like a violent pendulum. 1 hour I'm a genius who can rewrite the laws of thermodynamics. The next I can't remember how to tie my shoes or what color the sky is. My body is aging at 3 times the normal rate because of the metabolic stress the serum put on my organs. I look like I'm 40, even though I'm barely 21. My hair is thinning, and my joints ache with a phantom cold. Maya comes to visit me sometimes, but she looks at me with a mixture of grief, pity, and a lingering horror that hurts worse than the needles they stick in me every morning for testing. She tries to talk to me about normal things, but I usually just stare at the wall, waiting for the next smart wave to hit so I can feel like myself again. Only to realize that the self I'm waiting for is the monster that drove her away. I've become a living exhibit, a warning to any student who thinks they can cheat their way to greatness. I tried to be more than human, and in the end, I became less than a person. I reached for the stars and ended up burning my hands to the bone, left with nothing but the ashes of my potential. The irony is that now that I can actually understand the deepest physics of the universe during my up cycles, I have no one to share it with, and my own mind is a ticking time bomb. I traded my entire future for a few days of feeling superior, and I'd give every bit of that forbidden knowledge back just to have one more dumb conversation with Maya in that cafe. Even if I didn't understand a single word she said, I would give anything to be the guy who sat in the back of the class wondering about his oven again. This whole experience taught me that there are no shortcuts to being someone worth loving. You can't inject character, you can't bottle wisdom, and you certainly can't buy the kind of connection that comes from just being yourself, flaws and all. I thought being smart would make me a protagonist in a grand story, but it just made me a cautionary tale in a medical journal. I'm spending my remaining days watching my cells fail, and hoping that somewhere out there, someone hears this and decides that they are enough just as they are. If you learn something from my mistake, or if you just feel for the mess I've made of my life, please hit that like button. It helps more than you know to see that my story is reaching people. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next time I, or someone like me, shares a story that needs to be heard. Go ahead and tell me in the comments. Do you think I deserve this for being so vain and arrogant? Or was I just a victim of a lonely heart that wanted to be noticed? I'll be reading every single one of your thoughts while I still have the cognitive function to understand them. Your words are the only thing keeping me connected to the world outside these white walls. Thanks for listening, stay humble, and I'll see you all in the next story.